Hi, I'm Astrid. And no, I didn't drop out of school to follow a boyfriend across Europe. That's just what my mother told the neighbors. What really happened? I worked nights, ate instant noodles behind restaurant dumpsters, passed out on shift. No one came. Meanwhile, my sister? She was clinking champagne glasses in LA, on my money. At Christmas, Dad asked if the $1,500 a month was helping. I said, "What money?" The next morning, 83 missed calls. Turns out, Mom rerouted every cent of my trust fund to support my sister's dream. Now tell me, how do you survive being erased by the people who raised you? It was 11:45 on a Tuesday night, and the buzzing fluorescent lights in the back of the diner felt sharper than usual. I'd been on my feet for nearly 14 hours straight, 2 double shifts back to back, and the silence behind the storage shelves was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. I crouched down between boxes of canned chili and overstocked ketchup, tearing open a cup of instant noodles. No microwave. I poured lukewarm tap water from the break room faucet and waited. 5 minutes, maybe 6. It didn't matter. Half cooked was still better than nothing. Steam barely rose from the cup as I shoveled it in, each bite more about motion than taste. My legs ached. My fingers were raw from wiping down tables. My shoes, worn out and split at the soles, let in cold from the kitchen floor. Nobody noticed I was gone. Nobody ever really noticed when I was there. "Table 6 needs a refill," my coworker called out. I stood too fast. The next thing I remember was the sharp clang of the metal tray hitting tile, and then darkness. When I came to, the world was washed in pale hospital lights, the beep of machines, the scratchy fabric of a hospital gown, an IV in my arm. My mouth was dry, throat sore, and everything about the room felt temporary, as if I had been dropped into someone else's problem. A nurse leaned over me. "Do you have someone we can call?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I blinked. Then finally, no. Not because I didn't have a family, but because they wouldn't come. When the nurse left, I reached for my phone. 1% battery. I tapped in my passcode. No missed calls. No messages. I opened my texts anyway, just in case something had come through that hadn't notified. Nothing. Then, a ping. A text from Mom. "Glad you're doing okay? Could you send the name of that skincare line you liked? Celine wants to try it." A second one followed almost instantly. "Don't forget to eat." I stared at the screen. The silence in my chest was louder than any heart monitor. Not pain, not anger, just an emptiness I'd grown familiar with, a vacuum where comfort used to live. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was no question in her texts, just a performance of care, sent from God knows where. Probably a spa, maybe even mid-massage. The last time I spoke to her, really spoke, was 2 months ago. I'd asked about help with tuition. Nothing big, just enough to get me through the last part of the semester. "You're an adult now," she'd said. "You're supposed to manage." Manage. Like managing meant eating dry cereal for dinner, or doing laundry at 2 a.m. at the cheapest laundromat in the city, or working back-to-back shifts while studying for physiology exams because rent didn't pay itself. The nurse returned, handed me a hospital-issue charger. I thanked her, plugged in my phone, let it boot. Out of habit, I opened Instagram. The first story that loaded, Celine, smiling into the camera, jazz music in the background. She was sipping something golden, sparkling. The location tagged, West Hollywood Rooftop Brunch. Her caption read, "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream." A cream Dior dress hugged her frame. Her nails were freshly manicured. Her hair, blown out and glossy, bounced as she laughed into the camera. I looked down at my taped wrist. The IV tugged a little as I shifted. Still no tears. I tapped the 3 dots on the post. Saved. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I needed to remember. 2 days later, I stood in front of my mini fridge with the door open, letting the dim light spill out onto the tile floor. Inside, a shriveled half-lemon, an expired container of Greek yogurt, and one sad bottle of mustard. That was it. The cold didn't bother me. The emptiness did. The radiator in the corner clanged like it was choking on air, and the window by my desk let in a draft no matter how tightly I sealed it. I'd been home from the hospital for 48 hours. No calls, no knock on my door, no, "Hey, how are you?" from my mom or anyone else who claimed to be family. I plugged in my phone charger, sat on the bed, and opened my email. One new message. Not from anyone I cared about. Just the university's billing department reminding me my fall tuition balance was still unpaid. I closed the laptop without replying. Not because I didn't plan to pay, but because I had no idea how I would. To distract myself, I scrolled through the freelance boards I bookmarked. Ghostwriting gigs, editing jobs, virtual tutoring, anything that could keep me afloat. While tabs loaded, I reflexively opened Instagram again. Celine's face was the first thing I saw. She was seated on a rooftop, gold light catching her cheekbones just right. A glass of mimosa sparkled in her hand. Croissants, fruit, avocado toast laid out in front of her, like a magazine spread. Same cream Dior dress. Her caption? "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream." I watched the reel loop twice before recording my screen, just in case it disappeared later. I let out a low, stunned laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precise in its betrayal. Celine didn't just forget to mention me. She crafted a world where I didn't exist. And maybe worse than thinking she earned all this was knowing she thought I didn't. I stared at the screen, then pulled open my saved emails. 1 month ago, I'd reached out to Mom asking for help buying a second-hand anatomy textbook. Mine had been ruined by spilled coffee during an overnight cram session. I'd attached a screenshot of the listing, $42, used, highlighted already, but readable. She replied 2 days later. "That's a luxury, Astrid. You'll have to make do." A luxury. I leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about that word. Luxury, for me, meant a used textbook I couldn't afford. Dream, for Celine, meant champagne brunches on rooftops. I didn't even know what kind of person you had to become to not see the difference. Later that afternoon, I logged into my student insurance portal to check if I could get follow-up coverage from the hospital. The login failed. I tried again. Same error. I called the school's admin office. After being transferred twice, a woman named Janine finally picked up. "Hi, yes, I'm trying to access my insurance information." "Let me pull you up," she said, typing loudly. Looks like your policy was canceled in July." Canceled? "Yeah, request came from a parent file. Something about financial consolidation." I didn't respond right away. My throat had gone dry. I asked her to email me the documentation. When the email came in, it was there in plain text. My mother had submitted the cancellation form. No replacement coverage. No warning. I didn't cry. Again, not out of strength, but because crying would have meant I was surprised. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I titled the first column Request, the second Response. Then Celine's posts, bank statement dates, and excuse used. Row 1, textbook, that's a luxury. Brunch photo, $3,500 withdrawal. She's delicate. Row 2, insurance lapse, financial consolidation. Paris announcement post, $3,500 withdrawal. She's networking. I kept going. Every slight, every dismissal, every financial redirection that mirrored one of Selena's upgrades. At the bottom of the sheet, I wrote, "Mom's silence isn't absence, it's redirection." And that was the first time I understood. This wasn't a matter of miscommunication. This was a system, built quietly, operated efficiently, and I had been edited out of it. I wasn't angry, not yet. That came later when I realized who they chose to protect. A week passed in a fog of cheap coffee and unpaid bills. I kept my head down, went to class, did what needed doing. I moved through days like a machine that had forgotten how to rest. That Monday, I checked my inbox in the campus library. I was half expecting another late fee notice. Instead, the subject line read, FAFSA, Award Status Update. I clicked and blinked. Your scholarship application has been denied based on reported family income. I reread it. Then again. My throat tightened. I logged into my FAFSA portal. My heart pounded, not in surprise, but in resignation. The form showed $3,500 a month in parental support. Same figure from the bank statements. So that's what they reported. That I was fully funded, that I needed nothing. I printed the page and walked across campus to the financial aid office. Inside, the receptionist smiled like I was a returning customer. Name? Astrid Malcolm, she typed. One sec. Here we are. Denied due to parental contribution above threshold. Looks like everything checks out. Your file shows consistent monthly support. I nodded slowly. Can I get a copy of what was submitted? She frowned. Unfortunately, we can't release parent-submitted data without a formal request. Of course. I walked out holding back tears, not from shame, but from how precisely I'd been erased. Not ignored, rewritten. And in the space where need should have been listed, there was instead a lie with my name on it. Back in my dorm, I shut the door and stared at my laptop for a long time. Then I opened my notes app. I scrolled past my budget spreadsheet, past the email drafts I never sent, until I found a section labeled Conversations That Should Have Mattered. The last entry was dated September 14th. A Zoom call with my mother. It had started with me asking, gently, why didn't you help with the textbook? It was under $50. She looked up from whatever she was scrolling on and said, Celine asks. You never do. She cries when she needs something. You always seem... Fine. I remember biting the inside of my cheek. I remember wanting to scream that being quiet wasn't peace. It was practice, survival. I had trained myself not to need, because every time I did, I came up empty. But instead, I said nothing. I let her keep talking about Celine's needs, as though I were a houseplant that thrived on neglect. That call was the last time I gave her a chance to explain. Now, months later, I read the scholarship denial again. And it wasn't the money I grieved. It was the realization that need alone meant nothing. That help wasn't about fairness. It was about favor. When someone tells you you'll manage enough times, I whispered, you stop expecting rescue. I sat there, numb, typing that line into my journal. Then another. And when no one shows up, you build your own exits, even if you bleed while walking. I closed the laptop, walked to the sink, washed my face with cold water until I felt real again. The next morning, between lab and lecture, I stopped by my professor's office to drop off an assignment. Dr. Halden looked up, his brows knitting. Astrid, wait. I turned. Are you okay? He asked, with real concern. I've noticed a dip in your participation lately. Your last lab report was late. That's not like you. I forced a smile. Just a lot on my plate, but I'm managing. He didn't press, just nodded slowly. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I walked out, backpack heavy against my shoulders. And as I headed to class, one thought rang louder than the rest. If I told the truth about the loans, the fake numbers, the textbook I never got, would it still sound like weakness? Or would it finally sound like what it was? Proof that I was never fine. Thanksgiving Eve came wrapped in gray clouds and an airport coffee I couldn't afford, but bought anyway. I boarded the red-eye flight with a carry-on that weighed more in silence than in contents. Just a few textbooks, my laptop, and an envelope stuffed with bills I wasn't sure I could pay. No gifts, no holiday sweater, just responsibility. Landing in Chicago felt like stepping into a childhood I didn't recognize anymore. Oak Park hadn't changed, but I had. The drive from the airport was quiet. Mom didn't come to get me. It was Dad, barely awake but still polite. The ride was filled with safe questions. How's school? Staying warm out there? We didn't mention money, or Celine, or anything that actually mattered. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered once, like it wasn't sure if I deserved a welcome. Inside, the house was just as I remembered. Same smell of lemon wood cleaner, same framed photos on the wall, except all of them were slightly rearranged. In most, I was cropped out. In one, replaced altogether by a print of Celine in a graduation robe. Mom greeted me in the kitchen with a quick nod, no hug. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge," she said, turning back to whatever she was stirring. Celine was upstairs, already posting family time stories. I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. That night, I slept in my old room. The same twin bed, same curtains I picked out when I was 10. But the walls felt thinner now, like they'd absorbed too much and weren't sure what belonged anymore. Dinner the next day was quiet at first. Jazz played low from the speaker Dad always kept on the counter. The turkey was overcooked. The mashed potatoes were fine. I sat across from Celine, who looked radiant in a beige silk blouse and gold earrings that caught the light every time she turned to smile at Dad. Midway through the meal, Dad looked up at me and asked casually, "So, is the $1,500 helping with expenses?" I dropped my fork. It clanged louder than it should have. "What money?" He blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. Mom paused mid-cut of turkey. Celine sipped her wine like she hadn't heard. "I'm sorry," Dad asked. "There haven't been any transfers," I said, keeping my voice even. "Not since I started med school, not $1. The room went still. Even the jazz seemed to pause. Dad's eyes shifted to Mom. She didn't look up, just reached for her napkin and dabbed her lips delicately. "I thought we were sending it every month," he said slowly, voice tinged with confusion. "I needed to reroute some of it," Mom replied. "To who?" he asked. "She needed it more," Mom said plainly. "Celine's program is competitive, expensive. Astrid always manages." There it was. That word again. I stared at her. "So managing means starving?" She finally looked up at me. "Don't be dramatic." Dad turned toward me, eyes scanning like he was finally reading a page he'd skimmed too many times. "You've really received nothing?" "Nothing," I repeated. "Not even when I was in the hospital last month." Celine shifted in her seat. "Wait, you were in the hospital?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A moment of sharp memory hit me, a text I'd received weeks ago. I had brushed it off at the time. It was from Mom. "Make sure she doesn't notice. Transfers under the name again." I thought she meant a utilities bill, or maybe a subscription. Now I realized the she was me. Dad leaned back in his chair, hands loose in his lap. "You told me you were handling the transfers." "I did," Mom said. "But not to her," he finished. Nobody said anything for a long time. Celine looked down at her plate, her smile gone. I pushed back my chair and stood. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I just need some air." I walked out through the front door and stood on the porch. The wind was colder than I remembered. But it was clean. Honest. It didn't pretend not to sting. Behind me, the house remained still. No one followed. I stayed on the porch long enough for the cold to settle into my bones, but not long enough to shiver. The wind cut across my cheek like it had a point to prove. Inside, I heard muffled movement, chairs scraping, a plate being picked up, but no footsteps in my direction. No one opened the door. No one asked if I was okay. When I finally walked back in, no one looked up. Mom was wiping the counter like it owed her something. Celine scrolled her phone with one hand, her wine glass in the other. Dad stood in the hallway, not saying much, just existing in the pause. That night, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, the laptop warming my thighs. I downloaded the last 12 months of statements from the joint trust account Dad had set up for educational use. I highlighted every withdrawal that matched the same recurring amount, $3,500. The name beside each? Celine. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I copied the data into a clean Word doc and titled it with a single line. Where did it go? The next morning, brunch was laid out like nothing had happened. Quiche, fruit salad, sweet rolls. Celine hummed while plating strawberries. Dad poured himself black coffee. Mom filled her glass with orange juice, no champagne this time. I walked in, printouts in hand, and set a crisp white folder in the center of the table. You can read this now or later, I said. It has every deposit and every withdrawal. Dates, amounts, accounts, no commentary, just facts. Celine arched an eyebrow. What is this, a presentation? No, I replied. A fact sheet. Dad reached for the folder first, flipping the pages slowly, lips pressing into a thin line. Mom didn't move. Her nails tapped lightly against her glass. Celine finally leaned over, curiosity outweighing apathy. She froze halfway through page 3. Wait, this says my account. I met her gaze. It does? Monthly, since last year, while I was skipping meals and working double shifts, while I was in the hospital and you were posting brunch selfies. Dad looked up, jaw clenched. Is this accurate? No one answered. He looked at Mom. Leona. She took a slow sip of her juice, eyes steady. It was still used for education. Not hers, he said. I had to make a judgment call. Without telling me? He asked. She needed it more. She needed $42,000 more? Celine sank back into her chair, lips parted like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I didn't stay. I left the room, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside again. The sun was out, but it didn't warm me. I walked to the end of the block, past houses I used to recognize. I sat on a bench at the corner park, phone off, mind quiet. When I turned it on hours later, the screen lit up like a holiday sale. 83 missed calls, 24 texts, all from Mom. You misunderstood. We can talk. Don't escalate this. You're stronger. She's sensitive. That last one hit like a fist through silk. I stared at the message. I thought about every time she said I was strong, and how that word was used as a pass, for her, for everyone else, to do less. I typed one sentence in reply. That sentence is why you lost me. Then I deleted the entire thread. The house was still when I woke up, not in the comforting way childhood memories often are, but in that unnerving, hollowed-out silence that follows a wound no one wants to talk about. Downstairs, I heard the low hum of Dad's printer and the faint clatter of his keyboard. It was just past 11. Thanksgiving leftovers were untouched in the fridge. No one had bothered to reheat a thing. I tiptoed to the stairs and paused halfway down when I caught sight of him through the narrow crack in the home office door. He sat hunched forward, glasses low on his nose, scanning a screen like the truth might blur if he didn't squint hard enough. She said it was locked, he muttered. The trust fund portal was open on his monitor. I recognized the layout, same one I'd seen weeks ago when I downloaded my statements. He clicked through entries like flipping pages in a courtroom binder. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something heavier, betrayal with a coat of dust on it. When I came down an hour later, he didn't look up. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that said, "We'll talk, but not here." The next morning, everyone moved around the kitchen like it was a stage set. Too careful, too rehearsed. Brunch was being prepped. Quiche, cut fruit, artisan bread. Celine was already dressed like she was about to be photographed, makeup perfect, curls deliberate. Mom moved between sink and oven, pretending not to feel the shift in gravity. Dad sat at the table. "How did you get around the trustee lock?" he asked, eyes steady on Mom. She paused mid-pour of orange juice. "I filed for early disbursement, still for education." He didn't blink. "She's in fashion." She gave him a practiced look. "That's part of the modern economy, Byron. It's business now." He leaned forward. "Astrid's in medicine." I waited for someone, anyone, to say something useful, but it hung there, like fog inside the walls. Then Mom turned to me with that same tone she used when I was a kid asking for candy before dinner. You always figure things out. You always land on your feet. I swallowed that down without replying. Later that afternoon, while walking past the garage on my way to grab my charger from the car, I stopped. The light was on inside and the door slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw her. She was crouched beside a shipping box, sliding an envelope inside. On the box, in her neat handwriting, "From Dad." She sealed it, then stood quickly, unaware I'd seen. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back, out of sight, and turned on my phone camera long enough to snap a photo of the label. That evening, I waited until Dad had poured his usual decaf and was settling into the armchair. I sat across from him and showed him the image. He stared at the screen, then at me. "She didn't even ask me," he said after a beat, voice thin. I didn't nod, didn't answer. I let him sit with it. That night, the hallway light stayed on longer than usual. Around midnight, I heard the soft creak of the guest room door being opened, then closed. Dad didn't sleep in the master bedroom again. The next day, I received a text from Celine. "Why are you turning everyone against Mom?" I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "I didn't say anything. I just showed the numbers." The message was marked read. No response came. But the silence? That finally made sense. Monday morning hit like a reset button I didn't ask for. I boarded the early flight back to Philadelphia, with barely a word exchanged between me and my father. He offered to drive me to the airport, and I accepted, because I didn't want to give my mother the satisfaction of a goodbye. The silence in the car was thick, but not angry, just tired. He helped me lift my bag into the trunk, then said, "Be safe." I nodded. That was it. Back in my dorm, the radiator hissed like it remembered me. I dropped my coat over the chair and plugged in my phone, which had been off for the entire flight. As soon as it powered up, a notification popped. Missed call. Celine. Voicemail, one new. I hesitated, then hit play. "Hey, She exhaled into the mic like she was trying to conjure emotion. "I know things got weird, but I'm really struggling now. Studio rent's due, and Mom said she can't send more this month. You've always had a good heart." "Help?" The words help and heart clung to each other like a rehearsed line. There it was. A soft apology, wrapped around a withdrawal request. Even her tone was familiar. That gentle cadence she used when she wanted something but didn't want to say it directly. I didn't answer right away. I let the message sit for a few hours while I caught up on assignments and emails. Then, around noon, I texted her back. "I forgave a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I'm funding denial." No reply came. That night, while scrolling through Instagram stories during a late dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, I got a screenshot from an old friend from high school, Clara, someone who'd known us both since elementary. She sent the image with 3 words. "You seen this?" I opened it. Celine, sitting on a park bench, holding a cup of overpriced coffee, looking straight into the camera. Eyes slightly red, hair styled in loose curls. The caption, "Some sisters break you more than strangers ever could." Below it, in soft script font, "Even family betrays." Hashtags lined the bottom like a courtroom transcript. Sisterhood broken, circs support each other. Healing journey. Forgiveness. Takes time comments flooded in. You deserve better. So proud of your strength. Cut out the toxicity, queen. I didn't flinch. I didn't roll my eyes either. I just stared at it, longer than I meant to. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about strategy. Celine had pivoted, like any good PR person does. When the numbers stopped working in her favor, she changed the story. Framed herself as the wounded party. Painted me as a betrayer. I could have commented. I could have posted a screenshot of the bank records or the trust withdrawals. But that would have made me look like the very villain she needed me to be. So instead, I updated my timeline. The one only I could see. 12/5. Celine. Public sympathy campaign launched. Objective: isolate Astrid. Narrative: betrayal, emotional trauma. Tactic: indirect blame. Plus, passive image. Underneath it, I wrote, let her build it. The truth doesn't blink. Then I turned off my phone. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I didn't need the noise. By mid-December, the city had gone gray. Even the sky looked exhausted. Finals were around the corner, and campus buzzed with the kind of quiet that only comes from people holding their breath. I was walking back from the science building when I saw a text from Dad. I just want you to know, I'm meeting the attorney this week. I stopped on the sidewalk, wind biting at my neck. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then, I put the phone back in my coat pocket and kept walking. He hadn't asked for advice. He hadn't asked for permission. He just decided. Sometimes people change, not because you begged them to, but because the truth finally stared back hard enough. The next day, I got a message from my aunt, who lives 3 towns over and only texts when someone's either born or buried. I heard. Is it true? Your dad filed? So it was done. Later that week, while standing in line for coffee near campus, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a tag notification on social media. Someone had mentioned me in a story. It was a post from a local lifestyle blog I didn't follow. Headline: Creative Visionary honored for her resilience and family legacy. The image: Celine in a deep green jumpsuit, accepting a plaque from some grant foundation. Her smile stretched wide, the kind of wide that says, I planned this moment down to the last mascara blink. The article quoted her. Growing up in a home full of sacrifice and intellect shaped who I am. I'm endlessly grateful for my family's belief in my dream. But what made my stomach knot wasn't her name, it was my mother's. We made tough choices, the quote read, so she could focus on her path. We've always believed in her vision. Tough choices. The irony was surgical. I saved the article. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched the foundation's name. They had a contact form. I hesitated for a second, not out of fear, but because I wanted the words to land like truth, not revenge. I uploaded 3 documents: a PDF of trust fund withdrawals, every $3,500 transfer, screenshots of Celine's sponsored content, and her brunch lifestyle reels. A short note. It read, Sacrifice is not a hashtag. Some of us lived it. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. That night, I turned off all my notifications. Phone, email, even Slack. I didn't want applause. I wanted quiet. I pulled out my scholarship application, reopened the draft I had buried months ago. And this time, I wrote without editing myself to make others comfortable. I don't come from nothing, I typed. I come from being forgotten. I detailed the missed meals, the night shifts, the hospital stay, not as sob stories, but as facts. I wasn't applying to be rescued. I was documenting the excavation. I ended it with one line. Resilience isn't inherited. It's chosen. Then I hit submit. I closed my laptop and leaned back, not relieved, just steady. Some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes, it's just about choosing not to disappear. The last week of December arrived under the guise of normalcy. Quiet buildings, dusty windows, and the smell of burnt coffee in every academic hallway. Finals were done. Grades were pending. Most students had gone home. I stayed back a few days to close out lab work and catch up on hours I'd been forced to miss earlier in the semester. On Thursday morning, I was walking across the courtyard, gloves tucked into my coat sleeve, hands raw from handling beakers and bins, when Professor Lathrop passed me on the sidewalk. He smiled with recognition, then paused. Oh, you're Celine, right? The one with the creative grant? I stopped walking. It took me a second to realize he was serious. No, I said, trying to keep my voice flat. I'm the other daughter, the one who paid for it. He flushed, adjusted his scarf, and mumbled something about mixing up names. I nodded, kept walking. But the sting wasn't from him. It was from knowing exactly how it happened. She had overwritten the narrative with such precision that even people who had seen me in scrubs thought I was the sister in silk. Later that day, I saw another blog post. "My sister and I are close," Celine was quoted saying. "I owe her a lot." Underneath, a photo. I knew when it was taken, our last Thanksgiving before college. What I didn't know was that the original image had included me. The version they used had me cropped out, only Celine visible, her arm hovering where mine had once been. That kind of editing wasn't accidental, it was a choice. 2 days later, I flew home for Christmas. I didn't want to, but Dad had asked. "Just this one," he'd said. "It'll be different." I didn't ask how. I already knew better. The house looked festive, tree-lit, fireplace running, carols on a loop. Corliss didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence was loud even in silence. Christmas Eve dinner was roast and sides, nothing too extravagant. We sat at the table like actors in a play we hadn't rehearsed. Celine laughed louder than necessary. Dad kept refilling everyone's drinks like distraction was his job. After dinner, it was time for presents. Celine got new travel gear, a sleek Polaroid camera, and a stack of gift cards. Target, Sephora, Airbnb. She squealed, thanked everyone, even hugged Dad. I watched from the corner of the room. There was no box with my name, no stocking, no tag, not even a card. I didn't ask. No one explained. Corliss kept humming along to the music like nothing was missing. After they all went to bed, I walked upstairs, packed my bag, and zipped it shut with finality. The next morning, I caught Dad in the kitchen, halfway through a cup of coffee. "I'm heading back," I said, his brows lifted. "You don't have to—" "Class starts sooner than they think." He nodded, then reached into the drawer near the stove and handed me a small folded receipt. I opened it. It was from the bookstore, a new anatomy atlas, paid in full. "Not everything was forgotten," he said. I folded it back up and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't hug him. He didn't reach for one. As I walked out the door, no one called after me. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. I left the house the way you leave a hotel after a bad stay, polite, detached, and sure you won't be coming back. Philadelphia greeted me with wet sidewalks and the familiar smell of city grime clinging to my coat. The dorm hallways were quiet, most students still home for the holidays. I dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and opened the small window above the heater just wide enough to breathe. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my campus mailbox. No return address, just the logo of a loan servicing company. Reminder, payment on education loan IDGI, Malcolm 2387 is due January 15th. I froze. I hadn't taken out a loan. I knew every digit of my FAFSA record, and nothing like this existed. I sat down at my desk and called the number listed. After verifying my name, the woman on the line said cheerfully, "Yes, we have a balance of $8,900 on file for an education program, co-signed digitally by A.S. Malcolm." "What school?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling. She listed a private design institute in Los Angeles, fashion certificate program. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, "And the billing address?" She read off my parents' house. My mother's name was listed as the alternate contact. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, completely still. My name had been used, without my consent, again. And this time, for something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. I pulled up the PDF from my email inbox, printed it, and walked it straight to the campus legal services office. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I filled out the fraud report with the same calm you'd use to pack a box. It wasn't emotionless. It was efficient. The next afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop on campus to decompress. As I waited for my drink, someone tapped my shoulder. "Astrid?" I turned. It was Mrs. Anitra, our old neighbor from Oak Park. She was visiting her granddaughter for a campus tour. "Oh my goodness," she said. "You look so grown. How's life abroad?" I blinked. "Abroad?" "Yes, your mom said you dropped out and went to Europe. Met someone." I stared at her, stunned. "I don't even have a passport." She laughed awkwardly. "Well, I must have misunderstood." "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Later that evening, I scanned and emailed all the documents, the loan fraud, the altered FAFSA data, the bank statements, directly to my father. I didn't attach a message, just the truth. He replied the next morning. "I've already started the reversal petition with the trust attorneys. This won't be fast, but it'll be done." I read it twice. Then finally, I exhaled. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself for the first time in weeks. A real meal. Garlic chicken, steamed broccoli, rice from a proper pot, not a microwave pouch. I set the table. I poured water into a glass, not a bottle. No phone beside me, no music. Just a warm bowl and a fork. I didn't need someone to watch me eat to make it count. I sat there, quiet. And for the first time, it felt like enough. January dragged its feet like an old man in snow boots, slow, deliberate, and uninterested in urgency. I found my rhythm again, not in celebration, but in consistency. I graded biology quizzes in the tutoring lab, packed lunch with intention, and stopped checking my phone for reactions. One afternoon, while highlighting errors on a lab worksheet, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen and froze. FaceTime, Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then, against every instinct, I picked up. Her face filled the screen, haloed by soft golden lighting. Behind her, strings of white lights twinkled, music thumped faintly, and Celine laughed off camera. "We were just talking about you," Mom said, all teeth and practiced warmth. "Celine got invited to Paris Fashion Week. Can you believe it?" My silence was answer enough, but she plowed ahead. "She's networking like crazy," she added. "You should see the list of designers she's working with." "How's school?" she tacked on, like it was a formality. I tilted the phone slightly so she could catch a glimpse of the tutoring lab behind me. Fluorescent lights, whiteboards, stacks of student folders. "Still not luxury, apparently," I said. She blinked. Either she didn't catch the tone or chose not to. "That's good," she said, smiling. "You always make it work." I hit the red button before she could continue. Afterward, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't even sigh. I saved the screenshot of her mid-party grin, filed it into a private folder on my phone, and renamed it Last Call Answered. The caption I typed under it in my notes: "This is the last time I pick up out of politeness." That Saturday, Dad came to town for a business review. He didn't say he was coming until the morning of. Just texted, "In Philly, got groceries. Can I stop by?" I met him at the cafe 2 blocks from campus. He slid into the booth across from me like a man who finally understood silence. No apologies, just presence. He placed a second-hand anatomy atlas on the table between us. "Saw this at a thrift shop," he said. "Still has your tabs in it." I opened it, smiled faintly. "This is my copy, from freshman year." "I should have asked more questions," he said, eyes on the steam rising from his coffee. "I stopped needing the answers," I replied. We didn't hug goodbye. He just handed me a brown paper bag with frozen chicken, rice, 2 apples, and one oddly specific post-it that read, "Double-check your oil levels." That night, I sat by my desk with the window cracked slightly. Snow floated sideways outside. The radiator rattled, familiar and oddly comforting. I pulled out my journal, wrote slowly, deliberately. I used to think strength meant silence. Now I know it means choice. I walked over to the fridge, grabbed a sticky note, and pressed it onto the freezer door. On it, I wrote, "Survived, yes, but no longer starving." Then I turned off the light. The first green broke through the soil sometime in March, It wasn't dramatic, just the tiniest sprig poking out of the university greenhouse planter, defiant against weeks of frost. I stood there staring at it longer than made sense, my hands still dirty from repotting seedlings. I'd started volunteering twice a week, not for credits, not for pay, just because it was quiet, because nothing asked anything of me except to show up and water what was mine. My classes were manageable now. The scholarship had been reinstated after the review board accepted my amended paperwork and affidavit. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to cut back on bar shifts and sleep like a person again. On a Tuesday evening, just after I got back from the lab, my phone rang. Celine. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Her voice was fast, clipped at the edges. Mom's only sending me $1,000 a month now. That doesn't even cover rent. You have Dad's attention now. Do you think this is fair? I let the silence hang. She was waiting for sympathy. Instead, I said, I lived on 0. Remember that before you complain about less than you expected. She didn't respond. The line went quiet. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone for a second, not out of hurt, but because it felt like the final page in a chapter I didn't want to reread. No scream, no curse, just stillness. That night, I wrote in my journal, some people only learn empathy through absence. I didn't mean it as cruel, just accurate. The weekend came, and I bought myself a cake from the grocery store. One of those simple single-layer chocolate ones with too much icing and exactly the right amount of celebration. I brought it home, lit one small candle, and sat at my kitchen table. No one else was there. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, I'm proud of you. Not for surviving, but for choosing not to shrink. Monday morning, I checked my mail. Among the flyers and coupons was an envelope from the trust attorney's office. Inside, confirmation of asset reallocation, legal language, bullet points, clauses. My name spelled correctly for once. At the bottom, a handwritten line added by someone in the office. This amount is yours, not because you asked louder, but because someone finally listened. I folded the paper and set it beside my coffee. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Lecture notes, emails, grant proposals, not to prove anything, just because I could. Later that afternoon, as I walked past a group of undergrads laughing outside the library, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. Straight back, steady steps. That's the thing about survival. One day, it turns into living, and by the time they notice, you're already free. Hi, my name's Elisha. It started with a text from my father. Just 8 words. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. At first, I thought it was a joke, a bad one. But then I found my clothes in trash bags and the safe emptied. The will, disputed. My name, forged. My grief, weaponized. Now I'm piecing together what they erased, memory by memory. They called it family. But if family can sell your childhood and still sleep at night, what do you call that? Do you ever wonder what really happens behind the front door, once you're no longer welcome inside? I landed at Charleston International just past 7 in the evening. The air was sticky, heavy with early spring humidity and the faint smell of pine. I hadn't been home in 3 days. It wasn't a vacation, just a short business trip to Atlanta. But it was the first time I'd left Charleston since Mom passed away. My phone buzzed before I even stepped off the concourse. I thought it might be Verity asking if I'd landed safely. It wasn't. It was from my father. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, just a sentence. 8 words that cracked through my chest like a hammer through glass. I stared at the screen, read it again and again. I knew he was drinking again. I knew he was angry about the will. But this was something different. This wasn't a tantrum. This was exile. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my carry-on and made my way toward the Uber pickup lane. On the ride home, I kept trying to come up with reasons. Maybe it was a joke. A cruel, pathetic attempt at a punchline. Maybe he didn't mean it literally. Maybe it was just one of his dramatic text rants, the kind he'd send at 2 a.m. after a few too many bottles. But the driver turned onto our street, and I already knew I was wrong. The porch light was off. The shutters were closed. No sign of anyone waiting for me. I stepped out, wheeling my small suitcase behind me, and walked up the familiar stone path. I pulled my key from my purse and slid it into the lock. It didn't budge. I tried again, slowly this time, then jiggled it. Still nothing. I tried the spare key hidden beneath the garden pot. Same result. My hands started to sweat. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I called my dad, straight to voicemail. I dialed Harlan. He answered, and before I could even speak, I heard him sigh. "I'm not getting involved, Elle," he said. "What the hell is going on? Dad changed the locks." "Look, it's been messy since Mom passed. You know that. Maybe just stay somewhere else for a while. Let things cool down." "I don't need things to cool down, Harlan. I need a key. I need my house." "It's not your house, Elisha. Not legally, not yet." I hung up. My hands were shaking now, and not from fear, from rage. I started texting people, my Aunt Carol, Cousin James, even Becky from church. No replies. I sat down on the porch steps. The air was thick with night moisture, and the wood creaked beneath me. My jeans soaked through in minutes. I pressed my phone to my chest, like somehow that would stop the feeling of being so completely discarded. Verity answered on the first ring. "He changed the locks," I said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I got back from Atlanta, went to the front door, and the damn lock won't turn. Then I checked my phone. He texted me. 'Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore.'" Silence on the other end. Then, "Do you want me to come get you?" "No, I need to figure this out first. But thank you." I stood up, walked around to the side gate, and tried the backyard entrance. Also locked. The windows were dark, drawn shut. And that's when I saw them. 3 trash bags. Sitting under the porch light like they were waiting for the garbage truck. My bags. I walked over, unzipped one. Inside were some of my old clothes, rolled up in a way that looked more like eviction than packing. Another held bathroom stuff. The third? A photo album. My baby pictures. There was one of me in Mom's arms, sitting in front of this very house. The date scrawled in her handwriting. Elisha's first spring. I sat back on the grass, photo in hand. That's when I stopped crying. Not because I was okay, but because there was no one left to cry to. The door that had always opened for me didn't. This wasn't just about real estate. This was about memory, about blood. I looked up at the house, that old white siding and wraparound porch. My mother used to wave from it when I got off the school bus. She once told me, "This house will always be yours too, Elisha. You've given more than anyone." And now I was sitting outside like a stranger. A car drove by slowly. The driver stared. I turned my face away. I didn't want to be seen like this, like someone who no longer had a place to go. I picked up my phone and texted Dad. "Why are you doing this? Please call me." No answer. I was about to dial Verity again when I heard a rustle behind me. Probably a cat, or maybe one of the neighbor's sprinklers turning on. I didn't even look. I was too tired. Too humiliated. The bag sat there like a statement. Not just, "You can't stay here," but, "You never belonged here to begin with." By the time Verity pulled up to the curb, the street was nearly empty. She didn't ask questions. Just got out of the car, popped the trunk, and helped me gather the bags. I hadn't even realized how cold the night air had gotten until I saw my fingers shaking as I zipped them shut. Neither of us said much on the drive. The rain had started again, soft and unbothered, like it hadn't watched me get thrown out of my mother's house. When we reached her place, she handed me a towel and a warm pair of socks, like it was the most normal thing in the world to do for someone who had just been erased. I spent the night on her pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling long after she went to bed. The rain tapped the windows like it wanted in. like it was reminding me that no matter how warm the blankets were, I didn't belong anywhere anymore. By morning, the ache in my back matched the heaviness in my chest. I hadn't cried. Not again. Not since last night on the porch. There wasn't anything left to cry out, but something else woke up inside me. Not grief, not even anger. Clarity. I opened my laptop and searched for the email from 6 months ago, the one from my mother's attorney sent right after the funeral. There it was. PDF attached. File name clean and clear. Will final signed .pdf. I clicked it. I read every word, slowly, deliberately. The house, the land it sat on, the workshop out back. All of it was left to me. Not as a gesture of favoritism, as a recognition of responsibility. My mother had written, "Elisha has lived in this house, taken care of it, and supported me during my final years. I believe she understands what it means to preserve our history, not sell it." And yet, it wasn't mine, not legally, not practically, because at 9:43 a.m., when I checked the probate court site, I saw it. A petition filed by Lowell Parker contesting the will. Grounds: mental incompetence of the testator at time of execution. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. So that was the plan. I picked up my phone, called the probate clerk, straight to voicemail. I tried Mom's old lawyer. Number disconnected. Verity walked into the room, still in her robe, holding a chipped mug of coffee. "You look like someone who lost a chess match before she made her first move." I gave a half laugh. "It's because I wasn't invited to play." She handed me the coffee. "Then it's time to flip the board?" It was almost noon when I finally went through the last bag I'd brought with me. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just tired of standing still. At the bottom of my laptop case, tucked between some old receipts and a wrinkled boarding pass, I found it. A manila folder. Mom had handed it to me maybe 8 months ago, told me to put it somewhere safe. I never opened it, just carried it around like a charm or a curse I wasn't ready to face. I opened it now. Inside was a single piece of paper, a drawing, crayon on printer paper, dated in the corner. Elisha, age 6. It was a crooked house with a red roof, big windows, flowers out front that looked more like colored clouds. The sun had a goofy smile on it. Above the house, I'd written in uneven letters, "This is my house. I will always protect it." I ran my fingers over the drawing, smudged lines, bent corners, the kind of thing a parent might stick on a fridge for a week before tossing. But Mom hadn't tossed it. She kept it. And she made sure I'd have it when she couldn't say it out loud anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at Verity's dining table with my laptop and a pen, making a list of everything I'd paid for since Mom got sick. Bills, utilities, prescriptions, home repairs. I noted every time I took time off work to drive her to appointments. Every week I stayed instead of moving out. Every grocery run, every roof repair I hired out of my own account. This wasn't about resentment. I didn't regret a single thing. But I had to show him, that I hadn't just lived in that house. I kept it alive. Verity walked by around midnight, rubbing her eyes. "You're building a case?" "No," I said. "I'm building a map." She sat across from me, looked at the drawing next to my laptop. "Is that from when you were little?" 6. Maybe 7. I don't know. I guess I already knew then. Knew what? That love has to be defended. She didn't say anything after that, just sat with me until I finished my notes and printed a clean copy of the will for my records. Later, as I lay on her couch again, I whispered something into the dark. It wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. When I woke the next morning, the skylight above Verity's studio couch had already shifted its light across the ceiling. No dream to shake off, just a hollow pressure in my chest, reminding me that yesterday had happened, and today would be worse. I walked barefoot to the desk in the corner. My laptop was still open, but a file folder now sat neatly on top. Definitely not how I'd left it. Verity must have checked it before heading out. I opened it, Inside, an envelope from the Charleston County Courthouse. My name printed in bold. I didn't open it right away. Official paper carries its own kind of gravity. I just stared for a while, then broke the seal. Inside, a motion filed by Lowell Parker. He was petitioning the court to declare me legally unfit to inherit, citing emotional instability, past psychological counseling, and compromised mental capacity. I read it twice, then set it down. There it was. He wasn't just pushing me out of the house anymore. He was trying to erase my right to exist as my mother's daughter, to decide anything about her legacy. And the worst part? He was using the truth. Yes, I'd seen a therapist. Once. After Mom died. Her name was Elaine. I told her I couldn't sleep, that sometimes I still made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, that I dreamed the doorbell rang, over and over, that was it. But to Lowell, it was leverage. I clenched my hands, shoved the papers aside, and called Verity. I need Mitchell. 2 hours later, we stood in front of the house. Mitchell, our childhood neighbor, former Charleston PD, met us at the curb. Older now, but steady. I'll go in with you, he said. If there's no court ruling and you've got proof of co-residency, you're allowed entry, unless there's an injunction. There's not, I said. He nodded at the locksmith, already at work on the front door. We made sure Lowell wasn't home. The lock clicked, and just like that, the house stopped being a memory. It became a battlefield. I stepped into the foyer and froze. The warmth was gone. The plants Mom loved, dead. Her favorite rug? Rolled up against the wall. Dust floated in the light like the place had been picked apart. We walked down the hall. The old safe was gone, replaced with a modern one, digital keypad, spotless. Mitchell turned to me. You put that in? No? I didn't even try to hide the disgust, and I doubt it holds anything. The locksmith offered to open it. A few minutes later, the door swung open. Empty, except for a stack of new notepads and a pen. No journals, no letters. Verity whispered, It's not about the house, Elle. He's erasing her. Room by room, the same. Picture frames removed, bookshelves cleared. Even Mom's quilt was missing. My old bedroom? Gutted. Fresh paint where I'd once taped my drawings. Empty drawers. Not even a trace of dust. We left without speaking. Back in the car, I finally said it. This isn't grief. He's not mourning her. He's eliminating her. Back at the studio, I poured a glass of water. My hands shook. My chest tightened, and then stopped working altogether. No air, no voice. My lungs locked up. The glass hit the sink. I clutched the counter like it could anchor me. Verity was there in seconds. She took my wrist. Breathe, she said. In through your nose. Count it. I couldn't, but she stayed until my body remembered how. He's making you the problem, she said. But you're not. I nodded, though I didn't fully believe her. Later, I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. 2 columns. Removed from property and belonged to Elisha Parker. This wasn't a breakdown. It was evidence. Every missing heirloom, every journal, every meaningful item. I logged them all. Then I opened my email. To DeWitt, Lowell's lawyer. Subject, ongoing probate dispute. Message. If your client is confident in the will's integrity and my mother's mental state at the time, I assume he won't mind explaining why he emptied her home, replaced the safe where her documents were kept, and removed every trace of her existence. Odd behavior for someone with nothing to hide. I hit send. I didn't expect a reply. People like DeWitt don't engage, they intimidate. But I wasn't looking for answers. I just wanted him to know I saw everything. The next morning came slow and gray, the kind of sky that made even the blind seem tired. I was on my 2nd cup of coffee when the landline rang. A dusty old thing Verity only kept for spam calls and the occasional stubborn vendor who refused to email. I let it ring twice before picking up. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Then a voice, cautious but clear. Is this Elisha Parker? Yes, I said slowly. Who's calling? My name is Marion. I was your mother's nurse during her last 6 weeks. I felt myself go still. I wasn't sure I should call, she continued, but I saw your name on the news last night about the probate issue. I kept something to myself, but I don't think I can anymore. What is it? There was a few days before your mother passed. Your father came into the room while I was changing her IV. He had this manila folder, told her she needed to sign a financial form to keep her insurance active. She was weak, she didn't understand, but she signed it anyway. He told her, if she didn't, she'd be a burden. A burden. The word hit harder than I expected. It stuck to the inside of my throat. Are you willing to make a statement? I asked. I don't want anything from this. I just needed you to know. And yes, if it comes to that. After I hung up, I sat with the receiver in my hand for a long while. This wasn't just about property. This wasn't even just about a will. He'd used her weakness, used her love for him, to get what he wanted. He hadn't just stolen from her. He'd convinced her to hand it over. By noon, I was on the phone with the clinic where Mom had spent her last weeks. It took some back and forth, a couple transfers, and Verity pretending to be my advocate on file to get past the gatekeeping. But finally, someone connected me to a discharge coordinator named Tori. I explained what Marion had told me. Tori pulled up the records while we waited in silence. There is a signed release here, she said eventually. It authorized your father to close all shared accounts, terminate further care, and handle any remaining estate issues. But we did flag the record. It was signed under questionable mental clarity. You flagged it? I asked. Yes. But he insisted. As legal spouse, he overrode the warning. I looked down at the notepad in front of me, where I'd been doodling without thinking. The word override stared back at me, scribbled in thick pen. When I hung up, Verity said, he didn't just rewrite the ending, he forged it. That evening, I pored over old bank statements I'd printed weeks ago, but hadn't had the heart to go through. Somewhere near the bottom of the stack, I found it. A transaction that didn't make sense. 2 weeks after the funeral, $42,000 had been withdrawn from a joint account once belonging to my mother. The account had been left untouched for years. I called the bank. He was the joint holder, the representative explained. It was within his rights. Legal didn't mean ethical. It didn't mean right. I hung up and looked at the stack of statements, the photocopied will, the flagged medical records, the drawing I made as a child, and now, this. A pattern was forming. And then I remembered something else. Months before Mom died, I'd backed up some of her digital files. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she'd used voice memos to talk her thoughts out, she used to say. I pulled out the USB drive from my old laptop case and plugged it in. Dozens of files loaded. Most were nothing. Shopping lists, reminders to refill prescriptions, holiday plans. But one file, labeled March 12th night, was longer than the rest. I clicked it. My mother's voice filled the room. Tired. Slower than I remembered. But still her. I don't trust Lowell with this house. Not anymore. He doesn't see it the way Elisha does. She sees it as history, as sanctuary. He sees it as a transaction. If I say anything out loud, he'll guilt me. So I'm recording this just in case. Alicia knows what to do. I closed my eyes. Not to cry. To breathe. This wasn't just permission. It was protection, left for me when she knew no one else would step in. I printed a transcript of the memo, careful with the formatting. I added it to my binder of documentation, now over 2 inches thick, and then I opened my inbox and began writing a message to a probate attorney I'd found through a referral group for women handling contested wills. Her name was Ruth LeClaire. Her website was plain, but the testimonials were fierce. Subject: urgent probate filing, evidence of coercion and financial misconduct. I attached everything I had. The will, the financial records, the transcript, the recording. my own breakdown of property removal, and a single paragraph explaining what Marion had told me. Before I hit send, Verity walked in with dinner, just soup and toast. She set the plate beside me. "You okay?" "I will be." She nodded, then noticed the transcript. "That your mom's voice?" "It is." She picked it up, read a few lines. "Strong woman." "She didn't start strong, she got that way." Verity smiled. "Runs in the family then." I hit send. Not because I was ready, but because I was finished waiting. The morning after I sent everything to Ruth, I woke up to an email reply stamped 6:17 a.m. Sharp. One sentence. "We're moving forward." That's all it said, but I knew what it meant. No hesitation, no hedging. It was the kind of certainty I'd been chasing for weeks, months, really. Later that afternoon, as I sorted the scanned documents into folders on my laptop, Verity knocked twice on the studio door and opened it halfway. "You've got a visitor," she said, voice low. I expected it to be the process server, or maybe a courier. But it was Mitchell. He stood in the doorway like he'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. I nodded, waved him inside. He removed his hat as he entered, and that told me something was coming. Mitchell was raised in the South. You only take off your hat when you're about to say something respectful or serious. "I know you're going through hell," he began, "and I don't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong. But I've got something. I think it matters." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "I have a security camera pointed at my driveway. Picks up the whole front of the street and a bit of your old property line. I didn't check it until yesterday. Habit, you know. But I saw your dad. Couple nights ago. About 10:45. Meeting some guy in a sedan. He hands the man an envelope, points toward your place." He set the drive on the table. "I don't know what it is, but it didn't look like nothing." I opened the file that evening. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 days before I got locked out. Lowell stood on the curb in his windbreaker, talking to a man in a gray suit. The man opened a leather folder. They exchanged something, an envelope, thick. Then Lowell pointed, gesturing toward the house with what looked like rehearsed certainty. The man nodded, made a quick note on a clipboard, then handed him a pen. The video wasn't high def, but it didn't need to be. I paused the frame when Lowell scribbled his name. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was a transaction. That night, I went through my inbox again. Buried in a forwarded thread from a title office was a PDF, a scanned property transfer document. Owner listed Lowell Parker, but the signature, Elisha M. Parker, in what looked eerily like my handwriting. I pulled out an old birthday card I'd sent to my mom 2 years back, placed them side by side on the screen. At first glance, it was close. But I noticed it. The cross on the T in Parker was too short. The tail of the H didn't loop the way mine always did. Whoever had done this knew how I signed, but not well enough. By morning, I was sitting across from Ruth at her office, sparse but sharp. A plaque on the wall read, "The law doesn't care how you feel. It cares what you can prove." I handed her the folder, the drive, the printout of the signature comparison. She didn't blink once as she reviewed it all. "This isn't just unethical," she said finally. "This is a felony, and a dumb one." I almost laughed at that. "You want to hit him first, or wait till he makes another move?" she asked. "I want to stop pretending he's capable of decency," I said. She smiled without warmth. "Then we file today. Emergency injunction to halt any sale or claim of ownership, and a formal accusation of forgery." I nodded. My throat felt dry, but I didn't reach for water. I just sat there, finally still. By 3 p.m., the papers were processed. Served that evening. Ruth used a professional server. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to see the look on his face, but Mitchell offered to follow and film it. Said it might come in handy if he pulled any stunts. Later, he sent me the video. Lowell opened the door shirtless, beer in hand. The man handed him the envelope, said nothing. Lowell didn't read it right away, just stared at the name on the label. Parker v. Parker, emergency filing. He didn't look scared. He looked insulted. The same face he used to make when I corrected his math at the kitchen table, when he thought he was too smart to get caught. That night, I posted something online. Not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. When someone forges your name and tries to erase your mother's final wish, I wrote, you don't sit quietly and hope they do better. You speak, you act, you protect what's worth remembering. It didn't go viral. That's not what I was after. But by the next morning, I had messages. 2 former neighbors, a woman from Mom's old church, even a nurse who once helped during her final months. I believe you. Let me know if you need a witness. I always wondered why he looked so nervous after she passed. That last one stuck with me. He wasn't nervous because of loss. He was nervous because he thought I'd never fight back. By the time the courthouse had received our filing, the ripple had already started reaching the shoreline. Quiet at first. Just a few uneasy glances at work, a strangely delayed email response, a colleague who canceled a meeting without explanation. Then came the meeting request from HR. It was Thursday, late afternoon. I'd just finished reviewing a presentation draft when I saw the calendar invite pop up. I knew before I clicked it what it would say. The office wasn't hostile. No one shouted. There was no confrontation. That would have been easier to respond to. Instead, it was, we just wanted to touch base, and nothing is official. We're just doing our due diligence. The kind of phrases that sound polite until you feel the floor shift underneath them. One of the partners leaned in. Elisha, we received an anonymous email. It raised some concerns. It mentioned legal proceedings and alleged that you've been treated for certain psychological issues that might compromise professional decision-making. I sat back. Do you believe it? We're not accusing you of anything, the HR manager interjected, her hands open like she was physically pushing the idea away. We just need clarification, that's all. Clarification, not truth, not proof. Just enough daylight for doubt to creep in. I told them I had a legal team, that no judgment had been made, and I was not disqualified from anything. They nodded, smiled, took notes. When I walked out of the room, I didn't feel relief. I felt stained. That night, I went back to Verity's place and stared at the ceiling. The idea that my job, the one thing I'd managed to keep steady through all of this, could now be leveraged against me, felt like the final straw. But it wasn't the final straw. It was fuel. The next day, the mail came late. I was halfway through lunch when I saw the envelope sitting on the edge of the kitchen table. Ruth must have dropped it off. She never emailed things like this. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, her letterhead in clean serif font. Inside, a copy of a letter sent to her office, from DeWitt and Associates, signed by Lowell's counsel. If Ms. Parker continues this litigation, it read, our office will be compelled to disclose documentation and history that indicate prolonged psychological instability. This includes, but is not limited to, counseling sessions post-death of her mother, possible prescription history, and testimony from family stating patterns of emotional dysregulation. No threats, just a polite warning, polite like poison in tea. Verity read it over my shoulder and said, so now telling the truth about your trauma makes you unfit to speak about it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She was right. They weren't arguing the case anymore. They were trying to destroy the witness. The following morning, I met Ruth in her office again. She wore the same simple navy blouse she always wore when things were about to get serious. She read the letter silently, then placed it face down on the table. This is intimidation. They won't release anything without a judge's order, and no judge is going to grant that unless you're on trial for a felony. Which, spoiler, you're not. I didn't blink. I want a protective order filed today, she continued. We'll include this with our affidavit and show that your father's camp is retaliating instead of defending. I can spin this into the narrative we need." "No spin," I said. "Just truth. No redactions." She looked up. "You sure?" "Yes. They want me to be ashamed. But I'm not. Not of healing, not of hurting, and definitely not of surviving." She smiled faintly, then turned back to her computer. That night, I opened my post again. The same one that started all this. I clicked edit, and I added, "Yes, I saw a therapist. After my mother died, I didn't know how to get out of bed. I cried during meetings. I thought grief would look poetic. It didn't. It looked like silence, like checking the same drawer 5 times for a note that wasn't there, like forgetting how to answer, 'How are you?' without lying. I asked for help. I received it. I got better. That doesn't make me unstable. That makes me aware. If telling the truth about my pain threatens someone else's narrative, maybe their version wasn't worth protecting to begin with." I clicked save. Then I turned off my phone and sat on the edge of the guest bed, eyes closed, listening to the rain whisper against the glass. A few hours later, I turned it back on. I had messages. From a woman I'd never met in Alabama. From a man whose sister had been institutionalized after a similar inheritance fight. From a retired nurse who'd been fired after reporting abuse from a family's caregiver. I thought I was the only one. I've never told anyone this. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't respond to all of them. I couldn't. But I read every word. Lowell thought shame would make me quiet. But shame has no power once you stop apologizing for surviving. The courthouse smelled like old wood and copy toner. Familiar in a way I never wanted it to be. Ruth and I arrived just after 8 a.m., early enough to be calm, not so early that we looked anxious. She wore navy again. I wore black, not for mourning, for clarity. We sat in the front row, just behind the petitioner's table. Lowell arrived 5 minutes before the session started. No tie. Same brown blazer he'd worn to every funeral in the last 10 years. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes never met mine. Next to him was Trina, the real estate agent who listed my mother's home without checking who owned it. She looked less polished than in her ads. Makeup a little too thick, smile a little too tight. And beside her, as expected, DeWitt. Still unreadable, still smug. The judge entered, an older woman with steely eyes and a soft voice that didn't match her command of the room. "This is a hearing to validate the will of Eleanor J. Parker," she began, "and address allegations of forgery, undue influence, and breach of fiduciary responsibility." I exhaled slowly. Ruth started our side with nothing theatrical, just order. She submitted the notarized will, the digital backups, and the scan sent to me by my mother's attorney months before she passed. Then the video. Mitchell's footage, played on a mounted screen, showed Lowell passing the envelope at 10:46 p.m. to a man later identified as a notary with suspended credentials. The judge leaned slightly forward at that moment, her hand going still above her notes. Then came the signature comparison, mine and the forged one. My tail loops, the slant of the R. It was subtle, but clear. Next, Ruth played the voice memo. "My daughter Alicia understands this house. It's not just a roof. It's where my parents planted every memory we ever had. If it goes to someone who sees it as money, not meaning, then everything dies with me." The room was silent when it ended. Even DeWitt didn't object. Then Ruth called Mitchell to the stand. He walked slowly, but spoke steadily. "I've lived next door 32 years, he said. "I saw Elisha come back home when her mother got sick. I saw her fix the porch, replace the roof, sit outside with her mom every morning, even when her mom didn't remember who she was. And I saw her father stand on the curb at midnight, handing off a document like he was selling firewood, not a legacy." Then came the unraveling. Trina, under oath, fidgeted as Ruth asked, "And at the time you listed the property, did you verify legal ownership?" "Well, he presented a signed deed," she stammered. "And did you check the chain of title?" No, but I didn't think I had to. He said, he said, Ruth cut in, or he proved. DeWitt objected, but the judge waved it off. You participated in the misrepresentation of this property, she told Trina flatly. Whether knowingly or not, it's your responsibility as a licensed agent. That has consequences. Lowell stayed silent. For once, when it came time for the judge's ruling, I didn't expect suspense. I expected process. But her words still hit like wind against a cracked window, sharp, loud, final. This court recognizes the decedent's will as valid, properly executed, and consistent with documented intention. Ownership of the property is hereby awarded to Elisha M. Parker. All prior claims based on forged instruments or unverified transactions are null and void. Any future interference with her legal rights will be grounds for immediate contempt proceedings. There it was. No drumroll, no applause, just the sound of truth making its way into the record. Lowell didn't look at me when the judge dismissed the room. He gathered his folder, empty, I imagined, and walked out first. Trina followed, her heels clicking louder than they should have. DeWitt never even turned around. Outside, Ruth stood with me under the overhang. A reporter waited nearby, holding a mic loosely in her hand. You want to say something? Ruth asked. No, I replied. Not yet. I looked across the street at the bakery Mom used to love. Her favorite seat was still empty, the corner table by the window. This isn't the end, Ruth said gently, but it's yours now. I nodded. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Sometimes when a fire ends, all you're left with is silence, and that's when you know it's safe to rebuild. I didn't stop for questions. I didn't pose for photos. I didn't answer the stranger who asked if I was the daughter in the will case. I just walked, straight, steady, past the courthouse steps, past the street where I used to park before Mom's appointments, past the life I used to explain. I wasn't explaining anymore. The morning I stepped back into the house, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like air that hadn't been breathed in weeks. The windows had been closed too long. The rooms had gone still without sound. The scent wasn't betrayal anymore. It was something quieter. Dust. Faded wood. Forgotten corners waiting to be seen again. I stood in the kitchen, took off my shoes, and pressed my hand flat against the counter where my mother used to leave notes. Reminders to thaw chicken, buy toothpaste, check on Mitchell's wife next door. That counter used to feel like the center of our home. Now, it felt like a page waiting for ink. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, breathing. The next morning, a knock came at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found Harlan, my brother, standing there with a coffee in each hand. He looked unsure of which one to offer, so he held out both. No milk in either, he said. Didn't know how you take it these days. I didn't take either. I stepped back so he could come in. He didn't walk far, just into the foyer. I should have spoken up, he said, eyes fixed on the floorboards. I thought if I stayed out of it, it meant I wasn't choosing sides. You did choose, I said. You chose silence, and silence has weight. He nodded once, eyes still down. I know. We stood there for a while. I didn't ask him to sit. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I wasn't ready to give it. But I didn't close the door on him either. After he left, I sat on the porch with the coffee he brought. Lukewarm now. But it gave me something to hold on to while I watched the neighborhood wake up. Later that week, I got a call from the hospital. Lowell had been brought into the ER. Liver failure, alcohol-induced. He was unconscious, no insurance, no family contact listed. Except me. A remnant of a legal document from 10 years ago. Power of attorney. I didn't ask how they found the number. I didn't ask what room he was in. I just asked what they needed. Stabilization, transfer, the woman said. He's not in immediate danger, but he won't recover without support. Do what's necessary, I replied. Bill it to me? There was a pause. He won't be told? No? Okay. I hung up. I didn't go visit. I didn't send a card. I didn't tell anyone. A few days later, Ruth called to ask if I wanted to file a restraining order now that the house was legally mine. I told her no. He's not a threat anymore, I said. Not to me. But still, she said, there's value in a boundary being official. There's more value in me setting it myself. That afternoon, I had the locks changed again. Not out of fear, out of choice. He could walk this town, he could walk this world, but he would never walk through my door again. The next morning, the sun spilled into the back room, the one I'd been preparing for months, even when I didn't know I was doing it. The floors were scrubbed, the walls painted clean, soft white. Natural light pooled across the new bench I had installed beneath the bay window. It no longer looked like a place where people were forgotten. It looked like somewhere they could finally be seen. I opened the doors to the gallery the following week. No ribbon cutting, no press. Just a small wooden sign on the sidewalk that read, "What We Inherit, Stories of Home and Survival." The walls held work from women across the state, sculptures made from heirlooms, photographs of kitchens lost to fire or foreclosure, stitched fabric pieces made from dresses mothers used to wear. It wasn't just about grief. It was about reclamation. One frame hung near the entrance. It held nothing but a handwritten quote, centered on aged paper, with the ink just beginning to fade. A home isn't what you're given. It's what you dare to keep. Eleanor J. Parker. I stood across from that quote for a long time. People came and went, looked and nodded, some quietly wiping tears. No one asked who I was. No one needed to. At the end of the day, as I turned off the lights, I looked back one last time. The house wasn't silent anymore. It had become something else. When I locked the front door that night and turned off the last gallery light, I stood in the quiet hallway longer than I meant to. The air was still warm with the smell of coffee from the afternoon. A few visitors had stayed late, lingering over stories written in sharp ink and stitched fabric. Some had cried, some had stayed silent, but no one had left unmoved. That was enough for me. Upstairs, the windows were open to the Charleston breeze. It carried a different kind of stillness now. No longer the heavy silence of fear or confusion. This quiet hummed with presence. I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the night stretch without needing to fill it. The gallery had been open a full month. Every Saturday brought a new batch of visitors. Some were locals, neighbors who once crossed the street when they saw me coming. Others came from counties away, drawn by articles or quiet recommendation. We didn't advertise. The walls spoke for themselves. I didn't need to tell them it was mine. The house spoke in my mother's voice. In every photograph, in every quilt square, in the creak of the floorboards we never sanded down. That weekend, I stood in the entryway watching people filter through the exhibit when I noticed a familiar woman with tightly knotted hair and a faded leather purse. Mrs. Daly. She used to tutor me in math back in high school. She avoided my eyes then, looking too long at the frame near the front. Mom's quote, preserved behind glass. "I never thought I'd walk through this door again," she said quietly when she passed me. "But I'm glad I did." I smiled. Not because I needed her approval, but because I no longer needed it to survive. One morning, Ruth forwarded an update from the care facility where Lowell had been transferred. His condition had stabilized, but his finances had not. I hadn't responded to the previous reports. This time, I typed only one sentence back. "Thank you, no further updates needed." I didn't hate him. That was the strange thing. I didn't wish him pain. I just didn't wish him here. He was part of the story, but not part of the space. 2 weeks later, Aunt Avis visited. She didn't call ahead. She never had to. I found her standing on the porch just before lunch, wearing the same blue shawl she'd had since I was a girl. We sat outside with iced tea and lemon slices that kept slipping off the rim. "Heard the exhibit was turning heads," she said. I nodded. She tapped her cup gently against mine. Your mother would have been proud, not of what you won, but of what you refused to become. I didn't have an answer, just a quiet kind of ache that didn't hurt anymore. Later that day, I walked into the room I had once called mine, my childhood bedroom. I had left it untouched until now, a deliberate decision. No fresh paint, no reclaimed furniture, just space. The walls were bare except for one, a gallery wall of empty frames. A small sign below read, "Stories still missing, tell yours here." Some guests pinned notes, others left dried flowers, clippings of poems, even a photo of a woman no one could name. That wall wasn't curated, it was claimed, and I loved it more than anything else in the house. That night, as I closed up alone, I lingered in the doorway of that room. My own story no longer needed a frame, it had a foundation. I walked the length of the hallway slowly, turning off lights as I went. The soft click of each switch sounded less like ending and more like exhale. In the front room, I paused one last time. Outside, the porch glowed under a lantern Mom had insisted on keeping, even when Dad said it was too old-fashioned. She used to sit beneath it, rocking slowly, humming to songs no one else could hear. I stepped outside and took her seat. The neighborhood was quieter now, or maybe I was just hearing it differently. I watched as a car passed with two kids in the back seat, pointing at the gallery window. Their mom glanced at the house, then at me, and nodded. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. I watched them disappear down the street. I didn't need to be asked if I was the daughter in the case. The daughter with the court win, the scandal, the inheritance. None of that mattered anymore. I was the woman who stayed, the woman who returned, the one who didn't let the lock stay turned forever. In the quiet of that night, with only the creak of the rocker and the weight of everything unspoken, I finally allowed myself to think of Mom's voice again. Not in sadness, in grounding. Forgiveness isn't something you give away. It's something you use to anchor yourself. It's the moment you stop letting someone else decide the shape of your life. He changed the locks once. I changed the foundation. The porch light stayed on as I stepped inside. The last thing I passed before closing the door was the old crayon drawing, now mounted behind glass in the entry hall. This is my house. I will always protect it. Hi, I'm Sable. My sister built her empire with a smile, and my name on the paperwork. They said it was a misunderstanding when she slapped me, pregnant, in front of our whole family. But the lie didn't start there. It started with quiet rooms, missing documents, a will that suddenly had my name erased. Now they want me to stay silent, for the family. But what happens when the quiet one keeps the receipts? And what if the truth I'm holding is the one thing that can break everything they built? Would you stay silent if it meant protecting the people who erased you? They forgot my name tonight, but I still remember everything my father whispered before he died. I arrived 5 minutes early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because the longer I stayed outside in that parking lot, the more likely I was to turn the car around and go home. I'd picked the dress carefully, simple, long enough to hide the fact that I hadn't worn heels in over a year. It hugged my stomach in a way that made me pause before getting out of the car. But I came anyway, because if I didn't, they'd say I was bitter, or dramatic, or that I couldn't handle Velma's big night. The valet opened the door for the car ahead of mine. That car held Velma, flawless in her burgundy gown, stepping out like she owned the air around her. I waited. When the valet reached my door, he looked down at his list, frowned, and just said, "Name?" His voice had none of the "welcome, ma'am" warmth he used moments earlier. "Sable Forrester," I said. He nodded slowly, without looking me in the eye, and took the keys. Inside, I stood at the check-in table. A teenage girl with perfect hair scanned the guest list twice, then smiled in that uncomfortable way people do when they're trying to pretend you aren't a problem. "I don't see your name here. Maybe you're someone's +1. "No, I was invited." My voice stayed even, but my chest felt like it might split open. Behind me, A few older cousins brushed past. No hello, not even eye contact. I guess I was still invisible to them, same as I'd always been. I took a deep breath, fixed my posture, and walked inside anyway. The ballroom was all gold lights and polished marble. A string quartet played near the far end. People buzzed around round tables, covered in white linen and little signs that read, "Reserved for donors." The air smelled like perfume and power. My stomach turned, and not from the baby. Velma stood near the bar, surrounded by women in designer gowns, and men who smiled too wide. She looked straight at me for a second. No nod, no smile, then turned her head to laugh at something someone whispered in her ear. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been good at pretending I wasn't there. Lorraine, my mother, though calling her that tonight felt like a stretch, glided up beside Velma a moment later. She wore pearls that used to belong to our grandmother. When I was a child, I thought those pearls were magic. Now they just looked like a leash. She kissed Velma's cheek and smiled like this whole night belonged to her too. Then she turned and walked right past me. I might as well have been wallpaper. I sat at a table near the back. No one else joined me, not even a glance from across the room. I reached for my water and caught two women whispering as they looked toward me. One of them gestured subtly at my belly. "You must be exhausted, dear," the other one said, when I passed them later near the buffet. "Or are you just bloated from the hors d'oeuvres?" I didn't answer. I just smiled and walked on. There's a kind of peace that comes with not reacting. The gala was officially titled the Gideon Legacy Dinner in honor of my father. My name, not once mentioned. Velma took the mic just before dessert. She spoke about growth, leadership, family. Every sentence had the cadence of a campaign speech. "Everything I do," she said, "every step I take, it's all to honor my father's vision." She paused, looked at the ceiling like she was holding back tears. People clapped, some even stood. Behind her, a slideshow played. Photos of Gideon with colleagues, donors, grandkids. One photo of both of us. But I was off to the side, only half in the frame. I couldn't breathe. I stood up slowly and walked out to the patio. The air was cooler out there, away from the chandeliers and empty compliments. I leaned against the railing and placed a hand on my stomach. The baby fluttered gently. "I know," I whispered. "I didn't want to come either." The lights from the city blinked in the distance. For a moment, I let the silence settle. I pulled my phone from my bag and scrolled through my voice memos until I found it. "For Sable, do not share." My father recorded that note 3 months before he died. I'd never listened to it all the way through. Maybe because I was afraid it would break something inside me I hadn't named yet. But tonight I was already broken. I let the night wrap around me like a coat I didn't ask for, but didn't have the energy to take off. After leaving the gala, I didn't stop anywhere. No late-night drive-through, no gas station detour. I just drove. Windows up, radio off. My hand rested on my stomach most of the way, as if that was the only anchor I had left. The roads were wet, not quite from rain, but that sticky Georgia air that clings to everything and leaves the pavement glistening. I passed the glowing outline of the old train depot, the Waffle House on the corner, and the sign for the neighborhood I'd rented a room in. I didn't bother turning on the porch light when I got home. I knew exactly where the creaky step was. Once inside, I slid off my shoes and walked straight to the small guest bedroom at the end of the hallway. It used to belong to Lisa's oldest son before he left for college. Now it was mine, or at least mine enough to cry in without asking permission. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Beneath a folded towel and a bundle of old utility bills was the small metal box. It had been in my possession since the week after the funeral, passed quietly from our father's lawyer to me. No one knew I had it. I placed it on the bed and opened it slowly, like it might bite. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The worn-out manila folder with my name written in Gideon's slanted handwriting, the flash drive in the small plastic bag, and a cassette tape labeled in block letters. Play when you're alone. I had a small cassette player I bought off eBay years ago for an art project. It barely worked, but I kept it. Tonight, I plugged it in, loaded the tape, and hit play. For a few seconds, all I heard was the gentle hiss of the tape turning, then his voice. My father's voice, slower than I remembered, more tired. He cleared his throat. Hi, sweetheart. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I hate that we didn't get more time, but I didn't want to leave without saying this. I leaned back against the headboard, closed my eyes, and let it wash over me. Velma has always believed louder is stronger. She thinks force wins. I raised you differently. You notice what others don't. You see the cracks. That's why I gave this to you. He paused, like he was catching his breath. There are things she doesn't know I kept. Things I couldn't say when I was still alive because I was tired of fighting. But you still have time. If you need to use any of it, do it wisely. If you don't, that's your choice too. Either way, I want you to know, you were never invisible to me. I pressed pause. I couldn't keep listening, not yet. I set the box aside and walked to the tiny window above the desk. The moon was hiding behind a thick cloud. I thought about everything that hadn't been said at that gala. Everything Velma chose to highlight. Everything she carefully erased. 2 weeks before the dinner, I'd babysat her daughter, Maisie, while she attended a charity event. Maisie had always liked me, at least until she started parroting what she heard at home. That night, we were coloring at the kitchen table when she said, Mommy says you didn't do much with your life. That's why you shouldn't talk back. I didn't respond. What do you say to a 7-year-old who's repeating a script? Now, the words circled back, like a needle stuck in a record. I wasn't surprised Velma had said it. What stunned me was how easily it rolled off Maisie's tongue. That tone, matter of fact, almost bored, like it was just a rule in their house. Gravity exists. Sable failed. Don't talk back. I turned back to the box. There was one more envelope, sealed with a plain strip of tape. I opened it carefully. Inside, a notarized copy of an older will. The date at the top confirmed it, 11 months before Gideon died. My name was listed next to Velma's, both marked as co-beneficiaries. Not a dime more, not a dime less. The version Velma read aloud after the funeral had only listed her. At the time, I didn't ask why. I assumed she won. Again. But this paper said otherwise. I reached for the flash drive, inserted it into my old laptop, and waited. A folder popped up. Dozens of files, PDFs, photos, scans of receipts, bank statements, and one folder labeled Velma Override. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to, not tonight. I knew what was coming. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I stayed in the chair by the window, laptop screen glowing against the dark room. The folder marked Velma Override sat unopened. I wasn't ready, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I already knew what it would confirm. By morning, the air felt thick and stale. I opened the window just enough to let in the early noise of the neighborhood, the low rumble of garbage trucks, someone walking a dog, the gentle ping of wind chimes across the street. Life went on like nothing had been ripped open. I made coffee in silence and sat at the table with the folder from the box in front of me. A line from my father's voice memo kept looping in my mind. You were never invisible to me. Funny how one sentence could feel like a gift and a weapon. Around 9, I logged into my father's old tax account using the credentials saved on a notepad he'd once left under a stack of utility bills. It was the kind of thing he did, hiding important information in plain sight, where only someone who really paid attention would notice. The page loaded slowly, but eventually, I was staring at property tax records for the house Velma now claimed as hers alone. But it wasn't just hers. There it was, clear as day. Previous co-owner removed due to address abandonment. I blinked. That wasn't an error. Velma had filed a change of address form, without my knowledge, months before Dad died. Legally, it made it look like I had given up my claim. Abandonment. Like I was some couch someone left on the curb. I clicked through the history and saw the document. Her signature, notarized. My name, crossed out. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This was calculated. That afternoon, I stepped out to clear my head. I walked past the local grocery store, into the small square where an old courthouse stood tucked between a bank and a boutique that sold overpriced soaps. I remembered coming here with Dad once, years ago, to renew a vehicle title. The smell of the wood-paneled hallways hadn't changed. Neither had the man at the front desk. "I'm looking for a copy of a will," I said, "filed after Gideon Forrester's passing." The clerk tapped his keyboard. "Filed under Hanley?" "No. Forrester," I corrected him. "My father didn't legally change his name to match Velma's after their mother remarried. He kept his." The man blinked at me, then nodded and resumed typing. "You're the second person to ask about this will." My breath hitched. "Who was the first?" He didn't even look up. "A woman named Velma Hanley. Came in 2 days before the funeral, seemed in a hurry." I thanked him, barely remembering how I walked out of there. Back at the house, I closed my bedroom door and locked it. Not because I feared anyone would barge in, but because I needed one space in my life that I could control. I sat on the bed, pulled out a notepad, and started listing every time Velma had positioned herself as the one who stayed. Stayed? Is that what she told people? She didn't stay when I took Dad to his chemo appointments. She didn't stay when his tremors got worse, and I had to help him sign checks. She didn't stay when he forgot how to use the remote and called me in tears. Velma stayed when it made her look good. When there was a gala, a fundraiser, a ribbon cutting, she stayed for the applause. But when it was just me and Dad in a house that smelled like medical wipes and soup, she was nowhere. I remembered one night, a few weeks before he passed. I was sitting next to him in the den. He was wrapped in that old army blanket, the one he refused to throw away, even though it scratched like sandpaper. He turned to me and said, "Don't be loud, Sable. Be exact." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to be precise. So I backed up the files. I scanned the documents. I uploaded the voice memo to an encrypted drive. I labeled everything clearly. For legal use. Original will. Handwriting match. Forgery evidence. I didn't call a lawyer yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted the next step to be on my terms. I wasn't here to win a fight. I was here to make sure the fight was recorded. The next few days passed like wet concrete, slow, heavy, and impossible to move through without effort. I didn't rush to do anything. I just let the weight of what I knew settle in all the right places. But by Sunday afternoon, I got a message from Lorraine. Just 3 words. Dinner at 6. No explanation, no apology, no question mark. At first, I didn't plan to go. Then, I remembered something Velma once said during an argument years ago when I asked why she always made things look like I was the one pulling away. "You never show up, Sable," she snapped. "Then you act hurt when no one's waiting for you." So I showed up. By the time I arrived at Lorraine's, the sky had already gone gray with a southern drizzle. The kind of light rain that didn't soak you, just stuck to your skin like sweat. I parked on the curb and sat in the car for a minute before getting out. My stomach felt tight, and not just because of the baby. When I stepped through the front door, the house smelled like pot roast and tension. Velma's car was already in the driveway, so I knew I wasn't walking into an ambush, at least not alone. The table was set like nothing had ever happened. China we only used on holidays, candles and silver holders, and chairs that creaked under the silence. Lorraine greeted me with a nod, as if we were strangers meeting at a bank appointment. Velma didn't look up from her phone. I slid into the last empty chair, directly across from her. No one said anything about the gala. No one said anything about the pregnancy. No one said anything at all. Plates passed around me, not to me. Conversations happened over me, not with me. I might as well have been the extra chair they forgot to fold up. I didn't force small talk. I just ate quietly, chewing each bite like it had something to prove. At one point, a cousin asked Velma how the foundation's numbers were looking this quarter. She laughed and said, "Well, they're not Sable-level spreadsheets, but I manage." Everyone chuckled. Even Lorraine. No one looked at me. After dinner, I stood to gather my plate, but Lorraine beat me to it. "Leave it," she said without meeting my eyes. "Come help me in the kitchen." The kitchen was warm and too clean, like it had been wiped down twice before I arrived. Lorraine stood at the sink, rinsing dishes with slow, practiced movements. I stood beside her, waiting for her to say something real. Instead, she said, "I know you think you're doing what's right." I said nothing. She continued, still staring at a plate she hadn't moved in over a minute. "But this family's held together by more than facts. It's held together by dignity." "Is that what you call rewriting someone out of a will?" I asked quietly. Her shoulders tensed, but her tone stayed calm. "Don't escalate this, Sable. It's not good for the baby, or the family name." That sentence hung in the air like mildew. "You know what's not good for the baby?" I said. "Being raised to believe truth is optional." She put the plate down. Not gently. "This isn't about truth. This is about keeping peace." "No," I replied. "This is about keeping Velma clean, even when she's been playing in the mud." Lorraine turned off the faucet and dried her hands. She still wouldn't look at me. "I'm tired, Sable. I'm too old for this." I stepped back. "Then don't stand in my way." I left without saying goodbye. Driving home, the rain had picked up just enough to blur the edges of the streetlights. I didn't turn on the radio. My thoughts were loud enough. They think they've won. They always do when they're quiet, when they can get you to question your own memory, when they pass dishes and conversations around you like you're just the draft of someone more acceptable. But I wasn't a draft. I was the final copy. Back at the house, I made tea I didn't finish. I opened my laptop and pulled up the drive again. Every file I had, every receipt, email, financial breakdown, was now part of one big document, organized and backed up in 3 separate places. I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to document. I clicked on the audio file labeled Velma Audit Notes. It started with a cough and the familiar rattle of my father's voice. "If anything happens to me, show this to the board. Velma can't access these files without Sable." The clip ended abruptly, like he didn't get to finish the sentence, but he'd said enough. I stared at the screen, then whispered out loud, "You trusted the quiet one." And now, the quiet one is almost ready to speak. The day started quiet, but not the peaceful kind. The kind where the sky's too blue, the coffee tastes like cardboard, and your body knows before your mind catches up that something is about to split wide open. I had slept 3 hours. My phone buzzed at 7:32 a.m., a reminder I didn't set, but one I hadn't deleted either. Donor brunch, Velma Hanley Foundation. I hadn't RSVP'd. Of course not. I wasn't invited. But I showed up anyway. By 10:10, I was walking into the Heritage Club downtown, just as the first tray of mimosas floated by. The room was glossy, gold-rimmed china, white roses at every table, tall windows framing the water beyond like a portrait. Every seat had a personalized name card except mine. No one stopped me at the door. That's the funny thing about looking like you belong. People believe you do. Velma was at the podium, mid-sentence, tossing out phrases like transparency, impact, and generational change, the way some people hand out Halloween candy, cheap and eager to impress. She didn't see me at first. I kept my posture easy, casual. Just another woman in flats, holding a small purse and a smile. I didn't need to interrupt her speech. I had something better. 2 donors stood near the table, where coffee was being refreshed. I recognized one, Mrs. Denton, from the City Library Board. The other, Mr. Calder, ran one of the state's civic grant programs. I leaned in, calm. "Would either of you like to see the actual year-end report?" I asked. Mrs. Denton blinked. "Excuse me?" I offered them each a 1-page printout, just enough to raise a brow. Not enough to explain everything. This came straight from the foundation accountant. The parts Velma didn't include today. Mr. Calder looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to call security or offer me his chair. And that's when Velma saw me. She finished her speech, barely, and came down the steps with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sable," she said under her breath. "What the hell are you doing?" I tilted my head. "Letting people read what your staff sent me. You're trying to ruin everything I built." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I met her gaze with something I hadn't used in a long time: certainty. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just reading the fine print out loud." Her hand moved before I saw it coming. A sharp sound cracked through the air, the back of her palm connecting with my face. It wasn't hard enough to knock me down, but it was hard enough to stop the room. The clinking of glasses, the quiet buzz of networking. It all stopped. I reached up and touched my cheek. My skin stung, but I didn't flinch. A waiter gasped. Someone snapped a photo. Another person whispered, "Is she pregnant?" Velma froze. Her eyes darted around, realizing, too late, that silence doesn't protect you when witnesses are watching. I looked at her and said calmly, "You should have checked the guest list twice." Then I walked out. That evening, I sat at the small kitchen table in my rented room, holding a bag of frozen peas against my cheek. It wasn't swelling much, but it was the principle. A knock came at the door. When I opened it, Trent was standing there. I hadn't seen him in years. "Didn't know if you still lived here," he said. "Wasn't sure you'd answer." "I almost didn't," I replied, but stepped aside anyway. He held a folder in his hand, but didn't offer it. "I saw the video." "Of course you did," I said. "So did everyone else." He sat down across from me without being invited. "She threatened me, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Back then, when we were together. Said if I didn't cut ties with you, she'd file something against me. Said it wouldn't be pretty. I didn't take her seriously." "You should have." "I know that now." I waited. I wasn't in the mood for recycled guilt. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said, "and I want to help." I stared at him for a moment. "You want to help? Then help me finish what she started." He finally handed me the folder. Inside were financial records, donation logs, check copies, a list of shell organizations Velma had set up over the last 3 years. I looked at one line and blinked. My name. "She signed off using my name," I whispered. "She didn't just erase you, Sable. She used you." I nodded slowly. "And now we use this." We spent the next hour organizing every piece of information, highlighting inconsistencies, mapping transaction trails, connecting shell companies. It was like watching the foundation she loved so much unravel stitch by stitch. By midnight, I uploaded the entire file set to a secure portal labeled Whistleblower Gideon Trust Fraud File. Then I sent a single message to Catherine, my attorney. "Everything's ready. I'll be at the press briefing tomorrow." I closed the laptop, took a breath, and whispered into the quiet. She opened that hand to strike me. But I was already holding the match. I didn't sleep that night either, not really. My body went through the motions, brushing my teeth, folding the blanket, shutting off the light, but my mind stayed lit, pacing inside my head. By the time the sun was up, the damage had already made its rounds. Trent texted just after 7 a.m. "Have you seen the news?" I hadn't, but I knew. The kind of knowing that settles in your bones before your phone even lights up. I poured half a mug of coffee, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the first article. Then the second. Then the tags. Slap, the quiet one. Hanley, hypocrisy. Donor darling turns violent. There it was, in 1080p. Velma, mid-swing. My face tilted. The entire room frozen, like they'd witnessed a car accident they weren't supposed to talk about. Every local station was playing it on loop. National outlets were beginning to pick it up too, each calling it a moment of high society cracking under its own image. In the background of one clip, someone gasped, "She's pregnant!" That was all it took. The media had a story, and Velma's team was scrambling. Trent walked into the kitchen 30 minutes later, fully dressed with that lawyer look again. Tie loose, jaw tight. "You're not reacting," he said, watching me from the doorway. I didn't look up from my screen. "I'm already past the part where I react. I'm into the part where I respond." He nodded once. "Let's get to it then." We moved to the table, pushed aside last night's tea mug, and opened the laptop. I pulled up the internal records he'd helped me gather, each one with forged entries, inflated donor names, and my own name tucked neatly into invoices I'd never seen before. Each document told a story: shell companies using the foundation's funds to redirect money into fake programs, eventually deposited into accounts overseas. She'd signed many of them, not just with her name, but mine. Sloppily. Without my knowledge. "What was she thinking?" Trent asked, shaking his head as he clicked through a set of emails Velma never thought would surface. "This isn't just unethical, it's criminal." "She wasn't thinking," I said. "She was performing. She thought she could write whatever script she wanted, and the audience would keep clapping." I paused, scrolling to a transaction labeled under a charity initiative called Voices for Grace. "That's what she named her empowerment fund, right?" I asked. He checked. "Yeah, the irony's thick." We sat in silence for a beat. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. "I used to wonder why she kept me close," I said finally, "even when she barely spoke to me. Now I know. I was the alibi, the silent sister, the extra name on the ledger that no one would question." Trent exhaled slowly. "Well, she messed with the wrong quiet one." I opened a blank document. The digital report was clean, clear, and damning. I titled the file, "Hanley Financial Irregularities, for Disclosure." The subheading? "Compiled by Sable Forrester, co-beneficiary, co-author, co-erased." By noon, Catherine had responded to my email with one sentence. "We have enough." She called 5 minutes later. "This is solid, Sable. Not just legally, but optically. If we time this with the current media narrative, we can push for an investigation and protect your stake." I leaned back, letting her words settle. "There's just one condition," I said. She paused. "Go on." "Let her try to discredit me first. Let her drag out the act, denials, half-statements, all of it. Then we drop the ledger." Catherine was silent on the line for a beat too long. "This is risky." "I'm not looking for revenge," I said. "I want people to see what she built her house on, before they see it fall." There was another pause. Then, "I'll time the press release accordingly." The call ended. I stared at the folder on my desktop for a long time before hitting Compress and Encrypt. I titled the file, "Whistleblower, Gideon Trust Fraud File." I uploaded it to 3 places: the law firm's server, a personal cloud drive, and a portable flash stick tucked into a Ziploc bag in the bottom of my sock drawer. At 11:57 p.m., I was still sitting in that same chair, the glow of the screen soft on my face. Then the email came in. Subject line, "From Lorraine, urgent." I clicked it open. There was no greeting, no salutation, just a single sentence. "This wasn't supposed to happen. Please call me before you release anything." Attached was a PDF. I didn't open it. I stared at the screen, unmoved. No reply, no reaction, just breath, and the faint hum of cracks starting to form. Because when the walls start shaking, even the ones who helped build them feel the cracks. I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't nerves. It was clarity. I sat in the quiet with that email from Lorraine still open, the attachment untouched. The woman who once corrected my posture at the dinner table and told me to smile even when you're not invited, now wanted me to keep quiet for the sake of the family name. It was 6:43 a.m. when I finally picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Sable," she breathed out, like my name had weight all of a sudden. "I saw your email," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I didn't mean for it to come across as cold. I was—" She paused, then regrouped. "Velma made a mistake, but going public, that's not going to solve anything." You mean it won't preserve your comfort? I said. No, she snapped a little too quickly. I mean it won't help the child. Your child. Think about what kind of world you're bringing them into if you burn everything down. I stood by the window, watching the neighbor's dog chase nothing along the fence. You weren't thinking about the child when Velma slapped me. Silence. I've talked to people, she said. There are ways we can resolve this quietly, cleanly, without all the noise. Like we resolved Dad's will? I asked. Like we resolved the fake invoices with my name on them? You're being dramatic. No, I said calmly. I'm being exact. Her sigh dragged across the line. If you go public, you'll destroy what's left of this family. I think you're confusing silence with unity. Again. I hung up before she could answer. At 11:00 a.m., I received an invitation from Velma's attorney, Von Lister. A polite request to meet in his office, to explore all avenues for resolution. I knew what that meant. I knew exactly how this played. I showed up at 2:00 p.m. sharp. Von's office was in a brick building near the riverfront, with a view just charming enough to feel disarming. The receptionist offered me tea. I declined. The moment I stepped into his office, he stood and extended his hand like we were business partners. Sable, he said. Thanks for making time. I sat down across from him, keeping my bag in my lap. I'll get to the point, he said, sliding a folder across the table. My client wants to avoid dragging this through public channels. It's better for everyone, your family, your child, your reputation. I opened the folder. It was all there. A proposed non-disclosure agreement, a settlement check figure, a transfer of a modest house in a suburb I'd never wanted to live in. The catch? I walk away. No press. No claim to the trust. No legal follow-up. My name erased from everything I helped hold together. You'll get a home, Vaughn continued. A fresh start. This is the high road, Sable. I closed the folder slowly, keeping my eyes on him. Tell Velma, I said. I'm not expensive. I'm just done. His face tightened. You do understand what declining this means? I do, I said. It means she gets to worry for once. That night, I emailed Catherine with 3 words. They made contact. Then, I attached the file we'd built and labeled it GideonFall.zip. Every lie, every ledger, every photo, compressed into one folder. Before I logged off, I scanned the room and let myself breathe. This wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Later, I pulled out the old family photo Lorraine used to display in her living room. One of the last where we were all standing together. Velma at the center, of course. Lorraine's hand on her shoulder. Me, just slightly behind, like I wandered into the frame by mistake. I scanned it into my laptop. Digitally, I circled myself in red. Then, I added it to the first slide of my press briefing deck. Beneath it, I typed, the forgotten daughter, the used name, the one who kept the receipts. Let's see what happens when the quiet one speaks first, and everyone else has to follow. The city was still waking up when I stepped onto the sidewalk outside my apartment. The air smelled like dew on warm brick, one of those mornings that made Savannah feel timeless, like you could step back a century just by turning the corner. I walked slowly to Catherine's office, the thick manila envelope tucked under my arm like something sacred. Inside were the documents, the audio files, the photo I'd scanned the night before. The red circle around my face felt like a wound and a warning. The press conference wasn't scheduled until 9, but when I arrived just past 8:30, the sidewalk was already lined with folding chairs, news vans, and too many people holding lattes. They didn't seem to drink. Catherine met me outside. You don't have to go in, she said. We've got everything ready. I'll be speaking. You're the source. Stay out of the frame. That's the plan, I told her. I don't need the spotlight, just the truth to land. We stepped inside together. Velma was already at the podium, smoothing the front of her navy blazer like nothing could wrinkle her. Her voice floated over the speakers. Polished, familiar. I want to thank the community for their continued support, during what has been an emotional and often mischaracterized week. She went on, painting herself as a woman under siege, a leader misunderstood, a sister who'd been taken out of context. Catherine and I stood at the back. She handed thick, sealed folders to each journalist present. Some opened them right away. Others clutched them like evidence in a courtroom. Within seconds, the murmurs began. One reporter held up a page and asked, "Is this the original will?" Another flipped to the invoice pages. "Did you authorize these signatures?" Velma's face didn't flinch, but her hand gripped the podium tighter. "Those documents, whatever they are, do not reflect the operations of our foundation," she said. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by individuals with personal agendas." Then Catherine stepped forward. "Those documents were certified by a third-party forensic analyst. The will was filed with the county recorder's office and predates the version used during the estate settlement. As for the financials, there are 43 invoices across 3 shell accounts, all linked to the Gideon Trust. Most were signed using 2 names. One of them is standing behind this podium." Velma opened her mouth but didn't speak. That was the first time I'd ever seen her speechless without meaning to be. I left before the questions got ugly. Catherine knew what to do from here. Downstairs, in the break room, usually reserved for paralegals and interns, I sat with my phone turned upside down. I didn't need updates. I didn't need alerts. What I needed was quiet. Trent walked in, 2 coffees in hand. "I figured you hadn't had one," he said. "You figured right." He handed me the cup and didn't ask how I was. He just sat beside me and waited. After a few sips, I said, "I didn't think it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like, not winning, just finishing." He nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." We sat in silence for a while. When the buzz from upstairs died down, we both stood. I was about to leave when one of the reporters spotted me through the glass door. "Miss Forrester?" she called. "Can I ask you a question?" I didn't move, but I didn't run either. "You're the woman from the video, aren't you?" she asked. "The one she—" "Yes," I said. "Do you have anything to say to the public or to your family?" I looked her square in the eye. "I'm not here to accuse," I said. "I'm here to remember out loud, because silence cost us too much." A pause. No one said anything. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Outside, the light had changed. The press was still outside, but no one followed me. No camera in my face, no mic shoved under my chin, just me and my steps. My phone buzzed once. Lorraine. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past the crowd, past the parked cars, past the bakery that had just opened its doors for the morning rush. I stopped at the corner and placed my hand gently over the curve of my belly. "You'll be born into truth," I whispered. "Not wealth, but not lies." And that, I knew, was more than enough. 3 weeks passed, quietly. No headlines, no microphones, no more calls. Lorraine never followed up on her message. Velma. She vanished from the social calendar like a canceled parade, no longer welcome at charity luncheons or featured in the Sunday bulletin at St. Agnes. Her name, once printed across gala programs and donor walls, now lived in the footnotes of a pending audit. The foundation she built was under full review. Its board dissolved. Her accounts frozen. She wasn't arrested, but in this town, exile moves faster than law. I never made another statement. The one I gave was enough. Savannah kept moving like it always does. Soft mornings, hot afternoons, and evenings that smelled like magnolia and old stories. And me? I kept going too, but slower, gentler. With purpose this time. I spent those weeks preparing. For birth, for change, for the kind of beginning that doesn't need applause. Just a clean floor, a warm light, and no lies. That Monday, at 7:26 a.m., I met my daughter. Her first cry cracked something open in me I didn't know was still sealed. I didn't weep. I just exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since my father died. They asked if I wanted to list the father. I said. Not today. I named her Elia Grace. Not a family name. Not something passed down from a line that forgot how to listen. Her name was hers. A beginning without baggage. When they placed her on my chest, I whispered, "You won't inherit my silence, only my strength." In the days that followed, we fell into our own rhythm. Feedings, diaper changes, long, quiet afternoons with the curtains drawn halfway to keep the sun off her skin. The world felt smaller and better. One afternoon, I sat on the nursery floor, with her wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, one I crocheted myself in the last weeks of pregnancy. The walls were painted the color of sunflowers, just like I promised myself the night I walked away from Lorraine's table. I hung a single picture above the crib. Not Velma, not Lorraine, just my father. Standing in his workshop, sleeves rolled, smile worn like he earned it. It reminded me of who saw me first. Trent stopped by one evening. He didn't come with speeches or expectations, just diapers and coffee and an awkward offer. "If you ever want a co-parent in any form," he said, "I'm here, no strings." I smiled, tired but real. "I might need a weekend babysitter before I need anything else." He laughed, and for a second the air felt soft. No damage, just room. A few days later, Catherine called. "Velma isn't filing any motion. She's done." "Good," I said. "So are we." There was no celebration, no corks popping or hugs exchanged. Just the click of an email sent, and a feeling like setting down a heavy box you'd carried too far. That night, while Elia slept in the bassinet beside my bed, I opened my journal and began to write her a letter. Not because I needed to unburden anything, but because she deserved to know the truth before the world tried to tell her otherwise. Elia, I was the quiet one, but I remembered everything, and because of that, you won't have to. You'll grow up knowing the cost of secrets and the value of your own voice. You won't be raised on stories that sound sweet but rot underneath. You'll be raised on real things, like this city's smell after rain, and how strength isn't loud but steady. How sometimes the best thing you can do for a family is to stop pretending one still exists when it doesn't. You won't have to keep anyone's name but your own. You're not a legacy, you're a clean page. I folded the letter and slid it into the back of the journal, tucked between notes on feeding schedules and milestone checklists. Then I sat by the window, Elia curled on my chest, and watched the sky shift from purple to gold. No vengeance, no apology, just a mother and a morning. Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you stop repeating.